Okay guys, we're here at the workbench, and what we've got is we've got our Rapido E8. In this case, we're going to go ahead and install the Rapido E8 scale sound system speaker set, and we'll talk a little bit about if you don't want to go out and spend the extra money, you can use the speakers that are in there. And then we've got, of course, our Blunami BLU-21PNEM8. This is for the EMD, so that you get that dual EMD 567. So let's get started. This is actually pretty easy. We just slightly spread the body shell apart here in a few places, and the chassis just drops right out. You don't need to change any of the couplers. You don't need to disconnect anything. It's all pretty simple right there. And the coupler cut bar is actually split here, so you don't have to worry about potentially damaging it or removing the rear coupler before you're done. So we have our standard layout. You've got your 21 pin decoder here. This is the dummy board, so we're just going to take our pair of tweezers, stick it under here, and we're just going to simply work it out, set it aside, and then now what we're going to do is we're going to open up our 21 pin package, and I'm going to show you a couple of things. We're going to take the staples out, because there's a lot of good information here on the package, and I encourage you to look at it. So now that the staples are out, we'll take our decoder, set it aside for a moment. First off is going to be the 21 pin installation diagram. It shows you exactly how it installs into your 21 pin model. Talks a little bit about lighting outputs, speaker installations, and matching the wattage, because this is a 2-watt amplifier. That's why we got 2 of these scale sound system speakers. Now, this is going to be some of the CVs that you can address and change on the Locomotive, or on the decoder, I mean, and including some of the prime movers. And you can see here, this is the EMD Dual 567. And these are the CV values, but remember, Blunami, you don't need to use CVs. You can just do this from the app. But another important thing is this here is several air horns that you can use, and it's important to promote, or to point out, the table provides a small sample. This is not all the air horns you can find in your decoder. There's 44 different air horns preloaded into the decoder, so you can do that. On the back here, here's your function mapping, guys, and really want to point out your FX3 is turned on with button 24, your FX4 is button 25. I've had a lot of people calling up lately with FX3 trying to turn it on with the button 3, but they're getting the air horn because F3 is the air horn. So just pay attention. This is your this is the default function mapping, but the flex map technology allows you to put any of these effects wherever you want them. So if you want it on F3, you certainly can do that, and the app will allow you to do that, or you can do it through CVs. And then just a basic rundown. But this is just a small sample. This is nowhere near the information that's in the user's guide. So you'll want to check that out. Go to our website, SoundTraxx.com, and download the full user's guide so you can learn everything you need to know about the decoder. So with that, I'm going to set that aside. We're going to grab our decoder. We're going to simply open the bag. And we're going to put our decoder out and simply plug it in. And honestly, that's really all you need to do. I will tell you, you probably do or should address these speakers, because these speakers are wired in parallel. So it's not the best for working on the decoder. You can do it, but I would encourage you not to do it. If you do, make sure you turn the volume way down. But I'm going to show you really quickly how we're going to fix this. So you'll notice there's no screw heads here on the top. It's because all the screws are underneath. So what we need to do is we need to remove the screws that hold the circuit board in place. So we got 2 here. This is a light shield. And I guess it's just standard procedure because there's no LEDs, so there's no light shield, so that doesn't need to be replaced. You could replace those screws if you wanted to. There's 1 screw right here we're going to remove. And we're going to set that aside because we're going to need that. And then we go down over here, and there's one at the very front of the model that you can unscrew. And you don't necessarily need to unscrew it all the way. You can take it out. But once your board is loose, you can simply turn it over and access the screws here on the underside. And we're going to go ahead and unscrew these 4 screws that are located on the underside here where the speakers are at. And the speakers are in there, so that's a good thing. And thanks Rapido for that. But they are wired in parallel, so we're going to fix that. So we're going to take these 2 screws, we're going to remove them, we're going to set them aside, and then we're going to do these other 2 just like the same way. And then the good thing is this is easily fixable from parallel to series. So we're going to remove the screws. 4 screws are set aside. We're going to turn our speaker assembly over, and then we're going to lay our circuit board back down. Now the speaker assembly just comes off, and so what you have is you have the 4 speaker terminals right here, and they tap here on these pads here on the circuit board. Now the easiest way to wire this in series, because of the way they've designed this, it's really simple. Take a piece of Kapton tape, lay it across these 2 terminals right there. Then what you can do is solder a small piece of wire between the 2, and then you reattach your speaker down. Done. Because this terminal and this terminal would still touch the outer terminals here, your speaker minus and your speaker plus, and then the 2 middle ones would then be wired together, which would be insulated because you've laid the tape here. Now, I'm not going to do that on this particular installation. As I mentioned, we're going to use these Scale Sound System speakers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and reinsert the screw here. And that's all I need, really. I don't need these other 2 here on the end. If you want to put them in, you certainly can. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to do here on this model. Number 1 is I do want to install a CurrentKeeper. But the problem with that right now is they've got these capacitors here which are wired up and hidden behind a function to turn them on and off. Now, we can't access that. It's one of the higher functions, but the good news is we don't need to. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to remove them and just clip them off the board. And we can save them for some other purpose later, whatever we decide. But now I have this wide open space that I can put my CurrentKeeper in. So we're going to set their speakers aside, and we're going to set their capacitors aside because we don't need them. But now I've got this whole open area. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and solder a wire to each of these terminals here, the speaker plus and speaker minus. So we're going to turn on a soldering iron, and while we're doing that, I'm going to get my flux. Now for those of you guys, when you're soldering on circuit boards, whether it's this one or any other one, get yourself the proper flux. This is stuff made by ChipQuick, SMD 291NL. It comes in a syringe, so it's very controllable, and you can make sure to put just enough solder that you need on the joints. But this stuff is designed specifically for work on printed circuit boards, so you don't have to worry about any damage or anything being done because you went to the hardware store and grabbed some flux. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and strip and tin the end of the wire that's going to be soldered down, so that way we have a nice clean solder joint here. So I'm twisting the wires together. Now we're going to get a little flux here on the end. All right. Now we're going to get my solder over here. This is just a small thing of solder, very small diameter. Put a little bit on the end here. We're going to tin the end on both wires. And then now we're going to get our tweezers, and we're going to go ahead and solder. Now, speaker plus, speaker minus honestly really doesn't make that big of a difference for what we're doing. Pick one and be consistent through. So in this case, I have the longer wire on the red because I'm going to take this wire and go to the front speaker, which is the small one, and then the black one's going to go to the rear speaker, and then I'm going to wire them together with the extra length on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply put this here on the tab, and we're going to solder this down in place. There's that one. Alright, so now we have the wires down. Now, a couple of things we're going to do to prep this space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this Kapton tape, and apparently I'm running out, but don't worry, I have a whole new roll right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and lay it over these terminals where the capacitors were, just as a way to protect against possibly having anything shorting or making contact somewhere it shouldn't. And that should take care of it, just like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mount our speaker, and this will be back here because we need to leave room here for our CurrentKeeper, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get the, as you can see, I don't have much of this stuff left, so I'm going to get the new Kapton tape, and we're going to peel up a little bit. And this stuff's a little thinner than the other, or narrower I should say, so it'll fit in a little bit tighter positions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to mount this down to the chassis so that it stays put where we want it. And this one we're going to use 2 pieces of tape, one there and then one over the extra length on this back side of here, just like that right there. Alright, so now the speaker's in place, and so what we're going to do is we're going to take this black wire, we're going to come over here, and what I'm going to do for wire management is I'm going to thread it behind the Kapton tape here. Alright, where'd it go? There it is. And then I'm just going to come up and we're going to solder right here to the top of this. So we can cut it, save that for later maybe. We'll see. So I'm just going to trim the insulation back on this a little, and we're going to tin the end of the wire. So I'm twisting the wire together, and we're going to put a little flux on here. And then since I have the flux in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and put a little flux on this connection on the side of the speaker. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron, and I need to put some water on there, but that's okay. Get a little solder at the end of the iron. I'm going to go ahead and tin the end of this just like that, just a little bit more, and then we're going to solder this wire to the speaker terminal just like that. Easy peasy. Alright, now this other one, this other speaker goes up towards the front, And it actually just sits right over here on top of these components. And the speaker's designed for that. So find the place where it's nice and level, right about there. And then we're going to grab our tape. Again, we're going to mount this tape, use the tape to mount the speaker down where it goes. Okay, just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this red wire, we're going to run it over here to the positive side of this other speaker. Now these scale sound system speakers, they are actually labeled with the V plus and V minus, especially when you're using two of them. So the red is your V plus, the black or the unmarked is your V minus. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this red wire, we're going to kind of come up here and solder to this red side. So my speaker, in this case it's the speaker minus terminal, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Go into this terminal. If I really wanted to be worried about it, I'd go to the positive or to the negative side, and then this one would have gone to the positive side, but ultimately it doesn't matter as long as your speakers are wired together in parallel. I'm sorry, in series. It won't matter. Alright, so now this speaker or this wire is ready to be tinned. Put a little flux on there and then put a little flux here on the joint. Now one of the big things you want to pay attention to when you're soldering to these or any of the cube type speakers is you want to make sure you don't bridge the gap from your terminal connection here on the sides to the magnet in the middle, because if you do, then you can cause a short and that can cause a problem. And that'll damage your amplifier. So we put a little solder on there. I get a little bit more. Now I'm going to mount this to the speaker. And there we go. Alright, and wire management can be handled a little bit more after you're done, but ultimately I kind of like to try to keep it clean and neat as I'm going. So there's our one speaker terminal. Now we got to go from here, the positive on the second speaker, to the negative on the first speaker, or the forward speaker. So that's what we're going to do with this second wire here. So we're going to strip and tin the insulation just like that. Twist the wire, and now I'm going to put a little flux down here, and then I'm going to do the same thing here on the wire, and then we're going to go ahead and solder to this, and just to keep things clean, go ahead and grab my tweezers, hold that in place. And then we're going to solder to there. And there we go. So now again, this is where we can wire management. Come in under here. And again, I can tape all this down. I'm just trying to measure it out where I want it. So cut the wire short. And yes, there's no tape yet, but we're going to install a CurrentKeeper. So we're going to need to move the decoder out of the way to install the CurrentKeeper. Not there. Stay alive, because as I mentioned, they've got it hidden behind another function. Alright, so now we got some solder on the end here. Okay. Oops. And I did forget to put some flux on the speakers. We're going to put a little bit on the speaker here. There we go, just like that. And now just line it up. And there we go. Just like that. Now, we can put a piece of tape here across. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the decoder up and out of the way. Again, I'm just working it slowly so I don't bend any of the pins. Okay, we're going to set that decoder aside for a moment. Now what I can do is I can put a piece of tape. Let's see here, where's the tape end? There it is. And that'll help lock the wire down in place. Whoops. All right, and then we can do another one over here, just right there, just like that. Oops, good thing that wasn't in my leg. I just accidentally threw my knife on the ground. It's a good thing it wasn't in my leg or my foot. All right. All right, so now you can see the wire management. Now we're going to put another piece of tape here in the middle, but there you go. That kind of shows you how neat the wiring can be. Alright, so now we're going to install this CurrentKeeper. Now for those of you, we've done this installation before with the CurrentKeeper on a 21 pin format. So I'm going to do basically the same thing, but one thing I am going to do is trim the insulation just a little bit here. Try to make it as short as I can, because the space here is going to be pretty tight. So the biggest thing is you don't want to open up and expose any of the parts that are in there. Just trimming just enough to save a little bit of space. Now on the front, this harness just unplugs, by the way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of come in at an angle, carve that off, and then just kind of carve it down a little bit so that way it fits just a little bit better in that space that we have. And remember, if you'll notice, I didn't expose more than just the plug, so I'm flush here on the bottom of this and I'm flush here on the back. Actually, I can be a little bit, I'll go a little bit further. There we go. So the flush of the circuit board up front, and this is going to sit right here, and as you can see, it fits perfectly. So what I want to do is I'm going to put the pin in, and then now we're going to solder to pins 16 and 20. And they're actually labeled right here. You can see the V plus and ground. They're actually labeled on this motherboard. So we can just do that. So this decoder will sit right, or the CurrentKeeper will sit right here, and then these will come around. So I can cut this, and then I can save this connector for something else later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip and tin the ends of these wires. Now remember, I don't need to strip very much, because once I apply the solder, it'll pull the insulation back just a little bit more. Twist the wire, make sure there's no frayed ends. And went ahead and put on my magnifiers so I can see a little closer, because we're going to be doing small joints where we're going to be connecting. Micro work. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to take my blue wire and go to the V plus, the black wire will go to ground. So I put some flux there on the connections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the blue wire. Get a little bit of solder on the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up on the pin, hold it with the foot of the pin anyway, hold it with the tweezers, and then the soldering iron will come in, make my connection, and then we're in. Got a little bit more solder. Now we're going to do the same thing to pin 20, which is over here, the ground. And just like that. And then you want to make sure that there's nothing that is touching any of the other pins. You want to make sure that these are insulated and not touching anything. So once you're confident with that, then you can bring these wires around, set your current keeper down, and then we're going to go ahead and plug in the decoder. Make sure that the wires are free of any other components on the underside of the decoder here. Just like that. And then now we can tuck this up under here. And if you wanted to make this longer so the wires go on this end, it doesn't really matter at all. All you want to do is just make sure that your current keeper can stay. And then now we're going to take some more tape and hold it down. And just like that, we're in. Oop, I need to trim this piece of tape just a little bit because I don't need it sticking down below. There we go. So now you can see the tape's all here, tape's on this side. So this would technically be done. So we can test it really quickly. And on my workbench I have a small piece of track that I can get up on just like this. Okay, we're plugged in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my DC power supply, which is over here on the side over here. I'm going to turn it on and the decoder powers up. Now I'm going to grab the camera 2, which I'm using for an overhead shot. And I am going to open up the Blunami app. And let's go ahead and screenshot this for you guys. 2, 1. Okay, screenshot. Alright, so you can see I've got my Blunami V1.0. I just hit connect. Now it's connected. I'm going to go to standard. And remember, this is just a DC power supply, so I'm just using it to power the decoder up so I can test it on the workbench. You guys have seen me in the past use a 9-volt battery. That's fine, but it drains these things pretty quick. So I got just a regular power supply. So we're going to go ahead, turn on our headlight. You guys should be able to see our headlights on. Got our horn. Now we're going to come over here to the lights and FX3. You can see our number boards are on. FX4 turns on the white class lights. I'm going to turn off the headlight for a moment. The FX5 turns on our red class lights. The FX6 is turning on our truck lights down here. And then FX8 is turning on our Mars light and our green class lights. So we have access pretty much to all the lights. And then of course, if I turn on the headlight, change direction, I do have a rear light back here. Hopefully you guys can see it shining on my hand. But the rear light is on, forward. Now we're going to move forward, make sure it's moving. And you can see it's good to go. Now the one last thing I'm going to do is, you can see on this one here, I'm going to turn off the headlight. When I turn on the FX5, you see the red class lights illuminate. Now, on these models, on these locomotives, these were used as A units for the head of a passenger train. They weren't used for pushers or helpers or anything like that. That would be on the rear of the train that would need the red class lights. However, if we look closely, on our model here, we have these spring-loaded pins that come down to these little tabs right here, and this is where we can turn on the cab light. Now, because I don't want to worry about the red class lights, I do want to illuminate the cab light on this particular model. So we're going to repurpose this. So we're going to go ahead and turn all this off. We're going to move our power supply away. You can see that our CurrentKeeper is working. We're going to drain it down. There we go. So we don't have any power supplied. Now I'm going to put my, oops, let's stop the screenshot. Okay, so I'm going to show you really quickly how we do this. And it's actually pretty easy. So the first step we want to do is we want to take a small piece of Kapton tape like I have right here. And we can trim this a little bit more to size because this is a little big for what I need it for. I'm going to peel this up. And you're going to end up with a piece about 1/4 inch square. Just kind of like that. Now on here you'll notice that this says aux 7 cab light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece of tape over that aux cab light, because you see the plus voltage right there next to it. So what I've done by doing this is now I've insulated that extra lighting output from the motherboard, so I don't have to worry about any power backfeeding or causing any problems to do this. Now the question is going to be, how do we know which one it is? Well, remember we used the FX7. So when I'm looking at, or I'm sorry, FX5. Now when I look at this list, the FX5 corresponds with the aux 3 because the Europeans use headlight, backup light, and then everything else is an auxiliary light. But here we do FX1 and 2 are your headlight and backup light because they can be repurposed for anything you want. And then FX3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are the extra lights. So they're off by 2. So here we've got aux 1, aux 2, aux 3. The aux 3 is essentially our red class lights. Now you can test that if you've got your 9-volt battery with your 1000 ohm resistor. You can come in here and probe the 5-volt common, and then we're going to go ahead, I'm going to change hands first though. So we're going to probe the white wire and the FX5 common, and you'll see that those red lights did flash or did come on. There you go. So we know which one it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here where the white wire is, and I'm going to reach in here with a pair of very fine cutters and make sure I cut just the white wire off of this connector down here on this baseboard. You could come in and desolder it too. It's entirely up to you. Ultimately, there we go. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. So now I've got my white wire, so I'm just going to pull it out of this harness here. So now there's my white wire. Now, here's going to be the key on how we're going to do this. So out of a piece of like 005 brass sheet, I cut a small little square that's going to cover the pad where that goes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to solder the wire here to one of the corners of the, there it is. We're going to solder the wire, the white wire, to the corner of this of this replacement pad. And the insulation, like I said, is going to protect to make sure there's no power backfed into it. And then the brass is going to become a new landing for those for the spring pin for the negative side of the FX5. So we're going to go ahead and tin the end of this. Oops. And then we're simply going to solder it onto the corner of this brass piece here. Now this isn't a perfectly square piece, but it ultimately doesn't matter because we're just using it as a replacement. So I'm just going to solder to the corner here. First I got to get this so I can situate my hands where I want them. That'll work. Grab again another little bit of solder on here. And just like that, ready to go. So now the last thing we want to do is get some double stick tape. Get a very small piece of double-sided tape. And ultimately it doesn't matter. I use this thin Scotch tape. And we're going to create a little double stick tape piece. So now we've got 3 layers of insulation tape. Then we're going to take this brass piece and stick it on top so the pin comes down and touches the brass, and then we just tuck the wire in wherever it fits. Just like that. And the double stick tape will hold it in place, and then when the shell's there, it'll actually hold it down. So I'm going to go ahead and put the shell back on and then show you this finished product. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, we're back here at the workbench, and I wanted to show you, I did have to move some stuff around. I'm not sure exactly what it was on the inside of the body shell, and it very well could be these things right here. But when I put the speaker back here and the CurrentKeeper up front, the shell didn't quite fit on. It was missing by like that much. So what I did was I went ahead and moved these around. So you'll notice the CurrentKeeper's towards the rear here, right up against the track power plug, and then the speaker is actually moved forward over where some of the Stay Alive stuff they had put in that we had removed. Other than that, it's exactly the same. You will notice I did install test fit it. I wanted to do that before on camera just to make sure everything was working well. And so here in my screen here, and I'm going to screenshot record this to one screenshot record. Now you can see I'm already connected here, so I've got my headlight on. I can blow my air horn. And you hear the bell ringing. You can hear a lot of that. And then I've also got my lights all over here. And you can see that I've actually gone through and already kind of labeled all the functions so that way you can see what they are and what they're supposed to be, and how I've assigned them for my personal taste. So I've got the Mars light here on 22, or 23, I mean. The white class lights are on 24. The green class lights are on 25. Front number boards are on 26. And then I've got the cab light, but of course because the cab's off, or the shell is off, I can't turn it on because you can't see it in this. So I'll put in some B-roll over here so you can see me turn on the cab light. And then of course there's the rear headlight, and you can see that. So with that, it's basically time to put the shell on, and this is unit number 7019. That's what you can see on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick, yes, I did get 2 of these. So I'm showing you the install on one of them. Let's see here. Come on, it worked. It fit the other day. There we go. Just have to align it properly. And then the only other thing is because the coupler cut bar is actually split, so you don't have to remove the coupler or anything to put it on the decoder or on the body here. So everything's lined up perfectly. We've got the shell on, and I think it's on. Yeah. So now we'll put it on again, and I'm going to turn it around the other way so you can see all the lights on this camera. So we're reconnected again, so you can see that. So I'm going to turn on my headlight, and you can see I'm going to move the camera down a little bit. Okay, so I've moved the camera here, so you should be able to see the headlight a little better. And then we'll go ahead and blow the air horn with the shell on. So you can hear it's nice and loud, especially when that sound is resonating inside the body shell there. But we'll go ahead and turn on the other light. So we've got our Mars light. And you can see that I've got the Mars light on there. Up there. We'll turn it off. We've got our white class lights here. We got our green class lights, because in the era of these locomotives you would have extras or scheduled trains. We got our number boards lit up, which are kind of hard to see, but you can see they're lit up there when I put some shadow on it. And then we turn on our cab light. There it goes. Now we got our cab light on. I'm going to have to check the alignment of that pin, but there we go. You've got the cab light on. And then, of course, there's the rear headlight, as I've shown you before. So a lot of cool stuff that you can do with these. The good news is that they're pretty compatible. If you really rather have the red class lights, you can certainly leave it, but I chose to have the cab light on instead of the red class lights. And that was just a simple fix. So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. I appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully, and if you have any further questions beyond that, we'll go ahead and turn on all these lights here that you would see it as it ran down the track. So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys, give you guys some courage and incentive to get your Rapido E8s and get a decoder installed on them. So now I got to finish the other one over here and get it going so I can have a pair of these things ready for my next trip out of town, bring some passenger equipment with me. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.